Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
Since the dawn of the GAA in 1884, the telling of its stories have been just as important as the sports. Through the years, heroes and matches have been immortalised, inspiring generation after generation. But some of its most important stories have also gotten lost or turned into legend. And in this series, we will explore some of the GAA's most fascinating forgotten tales, separating rumour from reality and myth from the truth that is often more amazing than the fiction. I'm Michael Foley.
And I'm Ciaran O'Hara.
So join us for Over the Bar, exploring the histories of the GAA. Hello everybody, and welcome to Over the Bar, the GAA History Podcast. Ciaran, you are bringing us today into places I never thought this podcast would go. It's that day of murder mystery.
Yeah, it's our first venture into the Civil War as well, I think, Mick, isn't it? It's so this just in case people are just kind of going, oh, I'm not sure about this. Let me just put this in context. This today is the story of Civil War. It's the story of a Gaelic football legend and how his brother is accused of murder. It's the story of how another Mayo great has his identity stolen in order for that person who's accused to have safe harbour. And it's the story of how one town is just riven by these events for the better part of 40, 50 years.
Yeah, this is a story I never came across until you presented it to us there a little while back. It is a very strange story. It is very macabre. As you say, it involves a Connacht Council president, the brother of one of the biggest sports stars of the early 20th century in Ireland. And as you say, and a Mayo football star who was unwittingly drawn into this web of violence and deception. So, Ciaran, I'm just going to ask you the not very simple question, actually. How was Mayo GAA plunged into a murder mystery?
Well, to start with, we need to get a sense of what not even the county as a whole was like, but what the East Mayo town of Kiltimagh was like in the early 20th century. So it's a market town. It's a town which has, it's two streets, as you would imagine. It's even as you drive through it now, it's not as vibrant as it once was. Like many country towns, it's been affected by so many other things. But it's traders and merchants and pubs and shops, and they have a GAA club and they have other organs. They've got schools, church, everything. It's as you would expect at the time. But what it also has is it's reflective of the time. It's got people who are training to be teachers and who are becoming involved in the Gaelic League and becoming involved in other organisations, more secret organisations, and the volunteers, etc. It's all of those things. So I'm going to really talk about two families from the town, and a third will become involved as we go along. But I'm going to tell you first of all about the Ruan family. So the Ruan family, we've mentioned the Ruans before because Sean T. Ruan was the president of the Connacht Council in 1925. So Go back and listen, if you haven't already, to the episode about how both Galway and Mayo were declared All-Ireland champions in 1925. And you'll learn a bit about Shanty Rowe. But he's one of a family who owned a pub in the town. There's 3 brothers. There's himself, Thomas, Jimmy. Sean himself goes off to Dublin in 1908. He trains as a national school teacher in St. Pat's. His first job after college is in East Wall. He ends up living in Seville Place, the home of the Five Lamps, O'Toole's GAA club, all of that, who we have talked about in 1916 episodes, like so many members of O'Toole's involved. In the house he lives in Seville Place, he shares it with a guy by the name of Charlie Monaghan, who's actually one of the first casualties in 1916. He's one of the 3 in the car in Kerry that go off the pier. So these are the type of people he's mixing in.
So just tell that story. A car goes off a pier.
So obviously they're dispatched to help unload the arms
Coming in from Germany on the ship.
And they go off of a pier and they drown, and they are the first casualties of 1916 Rising, effectively. Well, that's his roommate, Charlie Monaghan. So that's the kind of circles he's moving in. While he's in Dublin, he joins the volunteers. He's in the same brigade as Tomás McDonough and others. When he gets home in the summers, he's actively involved in other things. He's founds Kiltimagh GAA club in the family's pub in 1910. The brothers are involved with him playing. He becomes, and by 1914, he's moved home to become a national school principal in a school that's between Kiltimagh and the village of Ball, which is important because when we've talked about this before, some of the people we've talked about, John Eddie McAlin, Dick Walsh, who were heavily involved in the revolutionary movement, and the GAA too, are from Ball. So his school is between the two. And he becomes the East Mayo Brigade OC. He's very involved, as are his brothers. In 1916, he's unlucky. He's at the Easter Teachers Conference in Cork when the rising occurs, and he's trying to get a train to Dublin, but obviously martial law's been instituted. He's been told, good luck, you'd be better off not going there. And during the War of Independence, he's very heavily involved. He's very close to Collins. Dick Walsh is the divisional commander. So he's running messages for Collins and Dick Walsh, and he's somebody that they trust to get the job done. And then, his brother actually in 1916, and we mentioned this in the 1925 episode, they did steal arms that were about to be returned or handed in by a rival faction volunteers. They stole those arms. So his brother, James, is actually given a medal for his part in that. It's the only medal awarded in 1916 to a Mayo man. So that's one side of it. But on the other side, in the same club, we have a figure we've also done an episode on for our Cordial Club members, Baller Lavin, Sean Lavin, an Olympic sprinter, an absolutely prodigious football talent for the age he played in, the first man to solo a football.
An Olympian, as captained an Irish Olympic team, and later on, sprinter. He was a major star in this period we're talking about.
One of the most preeminent names in world sport, but just happens to be an absolutely brilliant Gaelic footballer for Mayo as well.
And by the way, just in case anybody thinks he got the name Baller Lavin for something to do with soloing the ball or doing something, it was because, again, speaking of prodigiousness, he was an incredible handball player, apparently. That was where he got the Baller Lavin from. It actually had nothing to do with Gaelic football. So
he's another club member. And Baller Lavin's brother is a man by the name of Martin Lavin. Now, we said that Kiltimagh is reflective of the time. So Sean Lavin goes to train as a national school teacher as well, so you can get a sense of the influence that Sean Ruan has on him. But his brother goes at the age of 16. Now, his brother is 4 years younger than him. He goes to join the civil service in England. And by 1919, he's a civil servant based in Dublin Castle. And this does become important because he is one of Michael Collins' men on the inside.
Oh, yes. He's there with Ned Bry. and all these other chaps inside Dublin Castle feeding information out. Was he active in England before this, or did he just kind of get involved when he came home with the IRA?
He may have been sympathetic, suspect, but he actually, Collins recruits him and he joins the 3rd Brigade in Dublin at that stage. And he provides an awful lot of the intelligence for the squad that Collins uses on Bloody Sunday in 1920. And there are always suspicions among his higher-ups about his activities, to such a degree that by 1921, they've pushed him out and he's back in Kiltimagh. And there, he joins East Mayo Brigade, where he's under the command of Sean Ruan.
So he's just been spending much too long down in the personnel department, flicking through files. He's been spotted going in and out just maybe once too often in Dublin Castle.
Exactly. And he becomes a very active volunteer then during the War of Independence. He's known to be rash at times, hot-headed. We get the sense that this may have at times brought him into conflict with some of his commanding officers and neighbours, and they are all neighbours. And when we get to the point where the treaty is voted upon by the Dáil, he goes against his great mentor Collins and he takes the anti-treaty side. And he's not the only one. Dick Walsh, who I've mentioned, the Mayo GAA chairperson and the divisional commander, he also is on the anti-treaty side. But the Ruans are on the pro-treaty side.
And this really, I mean, you mentioned there earlier that how Kiltimagh, in its own way, captures a lot about Ireland in this time. And now we have a group of young men as well. Like when we read, you know, Sean T. Ryan's a president of the Connacht Council and all this kind of stuff, you know, you might have this idea of an aging gentleman who's been an administrator for many years. These guys are young men. They're young men and they're neighbours and presumably to some degree friends, because at the very least through their GAA involvement with each other, whatever about their politics. But now they're split, like so many families and so many areas and so many neighbourhoods were by the treaty. So we have, as you say, we have the Ruans on the pro-treaty side. Sean T. Ruan is on the pro-treaty side.
And his brothers who are in... So we've got, to put it in perspective, Sean T. Ruan's in his 30s. His brothers are younger, Thomas and James. At this point, Martin Lavin is only 20.
Yeah. I think sometimes, you know, especially when we're talking about Civil War, War of Independence, and even, you know, GAA politics at this time, an awful lot of the people who are involved are of that age, aren't they? It's not like, as I say, it's not like administrators now that are generally a little older. These were young guns, young bucks, you know, full of energy and ideas and notions about how things should be.
And reared within 20 years of cultural nationalism and association with the volunteers and the IRB and the IRA, and have, you know, may or may not be involved in the various societies they are because they are trying to infiltrate. Like Sean Ruan in 1916 is accused of using the local drama group in Kiltimagh as a front for a secret society. You know what I mean? So you're getting a sense of what's going on here. But when the pro and anti-treaty forces kind of solidify in the aftermath of the vote in Dáil Éireann, like Mayo is one of those counties that's really anti-treaty in terms of how it appears, because the three main towns are taken over by anti-treaty forces: Ballina, Castlebar and Westport. And ultimately, that means that the Irish Army have no presence. The new Free State Army have no presence within the jurisdiction. Now, there's a few things that seem to have tipped this very slowly towards where we're getting to, which is these killings. And what we get first is life is kind of, people are trying to get on with things. Like Mayo play Galway in this time, and Sean Lavin is the star of the show, by the way. So on June the 18th, Sean Lavin is the star of the show in the first round of the Connacht Championship as Mayo beat Galway in Tuam. It's the 1921 championship, but it's getting underway.
Games are being played.
Yeah, but literally only a couple of weeks beforehand, at Mass in Kiltimagh, a crowd has had to disarm Martin Lavin, his brother, of a revolver because he's there to shoot the Ruans as they come out of Mass. Now, one of the mistakes there is he is disarmed, they take the gun away from him, but somehow it's gotten back to him. So, you've got the football then June 18th, then on June 28th, Michael Collins orders forces into the forecourts. And this seems to have been a tipping point because the following day, which is a fair day in Kiltimagh, it's a busy time. Farmers are bringing in animals, trading. People are selling produce from the fields. You can imagine what a busy market town is like. And Martin Lavin arrives in with colleagues, anti-treaty colleagues from East Mayo. And they go into Ruan's pub to shoot the three brothers. Now, a melee breaks out. Shot is fired into the ceiling. By the time everything is settled, we've got Jimmy Ruan, has been shot in the back inside the pub. Thomas has been dragged out on the street where he's been shot. He's calling for a priest. He knows that he's in grave danger. And he's shouting, Martin Lavin shot me. So witnesses now have Martin Lavin shot me. And there's a third casualty at the scene who is dead. Now it is one of the anti-treaty party, a man by the name of Captain Willie Moran. And bizarrely in the aftermath of this, Martin Lavin is accused of not just shooting the two Ruans, but also his colleague, Willie Moran.
So how could this have happened? I mean, there's so many questions, but even just to start with that one alone, why is Martin Lavin accused of injuring one of his comrades?
Presumably because it's been witnessed that he has. And unfortunately, at this time, and this is we have no testimony in local newspapers, etc., because at the time, the three major towns where the newspapers are published are under the command of anti-treaty forces and are being censored.
There's a media lockdown of sorts.
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
So we can take it from that eyewitness account that Martin Lavin killed his own comrade. From I suppose what I'm wondering is, I kind of hinted at it before, how close were the Lavins and the Ruans? Do we know previous to this?
As close as anybody involved in the same organisation would be within a town. As close as a principal of a local national school might. Just picture the circumstances now. There's a young lad in the town who's going off to become, he's a great footballer with the club that you founded. He's playing with Mayo. He's going off to be a national school teacher. Are you going to be close to him? Are you going to encourage him? Of course you are.
Yes, you are.
They're going to be close enough for that. Close enough that they've been in the same brigade of the IRA.
So they're close. And the second question that I have about Martin Lavin in particular, you mentioned there he's 20 years of age. He had a gun taken off him outside Kiltimagh Church maybe 4 or 5 weeks before this incident. Would he have had a reputation as a hothead? Was he known to be a man of high temper? He
was known to be of high temper. So whether this is something personal for him in how he's been treated, how he perceives his relationship with the Ruans, we don't know, or whether it's just because they're the most visible pro-treaty presence within the town, we will never know. But what we do know is that the two Ruan brothers are taken to Castlebar Hospital. And a week later, Thomas dies. So we now have 2 fatalities from this incident. And we have Jimmy fighting for his life. And one of the things that does actually occur is, because Tom Ruan dies and because he's a county councillor at the time, there is a vote of sympathy for him in council chambers. Now, you would expect that given that he was on the pro-treaty side, that we would not hear in the chamber from someone on the anti-treaty side. But we do hear from Dick Walsh.
And what does he have to say for himself?
Tommy Ruan was my personal friend for a long time. And I found him to be everything that an Irishman should be. It never struck me at any time that I would be against Tommy Ruan or that Tommy Ruan would be against me, and that one or the other of us would fall as a consequence of our differences. But this is one of the awful things that happen in the struggle of brother against brother and father against son. No man had a higher regard for Tommy Ruan than I, and I deeply regret his death.
And doesn't that just capture the tragedy of the Civil War right there in one statement? You've got 2 men holding similar but opposing convictions on an issue, who clearly would have admired and respected each other, considered each other friends.
And this is the thing, the anti-treaty forces seem to imply that it's like an incident or a tragedy in Kiltimagh. It doesn't seem to have been something that was ordered. You're given the very clear impression that this was an East Mayo anti-treaty force operating outside of the chain of command and under the direction of one man, Martin Lavin.
Who was considered a lone wolf in this case. Martin Lavin is the lone wolf here, who was, as you say, gone out with a group and taken out the Ruan brothers. So just I'm trying to put myself in the position of the scene here. So, as you say, we have one brother is shot in the back in the pub, another one is dragged outside and shot on the street. This is a very dark scene for a town like Kiltimagh.
On a busy day when there's people in at the fair, can you imagine the panic? Guns being fired on the street.
Yeah, must have been mayhem. Does it have any impact on the town going forward?
Obviously it does, because you're talking about a leading figure in the town has been killed, murdered in the opinion of some. You're talking about another who is maimed and in hospital, and you're talking about a threat upon the principal of the local national school. All these things just sound crazy when you think about it now. But for Martin Lavin, he knows he's got to get out of town now. And this is where the third figure comes into this. So, as big a name as Sean Lavin is in the 1920s playing football for Mayo, by the end of the 1920s, the foremost and one of the best known figures is a young man by the name of Michael Mulderrick, who we have spoken about in that 1925 episode as well. He's a first cousin of the Lavins. And in order to make his escape, Martin Lavin dyes his hair black. He pretends that he is his first cousin, Michael Mulderrick, who at this time is away teacher training in Waterford. He knows that the Mulderricks have relatives in Antrim that have never met the Mayo Mulderricks. So he decides it's right time for him to go and visit and let them meet their cousin. So he pretends that he is Michael Mulderrick, heads for Antrim, stays in Belfast with the Mulderrick extended family, one of whom is a police officer, by the way. And he tells them that he's on his way to England, and the policeman offers to walk him to the boat, but says he'll change his uniform. And he says, oh, no, you keep your uniform on, you walk me to the boat. And he leaves Ireland pretending to be his first cousin, Michael Mulderrick.
This is extraordinary. Like, imagine the possibilities. I mean, it would have been conceivable that when a person who they think is Michael Mulderrick arrives at their door, that someone may send a letter down to their cousins in Mayo and say, "Oh, Michael arrived safe and sound," or some kind of communication might have occurred between the two branches of the family. But obviously, that doesn't happen.
Well, not in the immediate term, but it does happen soon after because Michael Mulderrick comes to learn that his identity has been stolen.
But that comes later. So what happens? So Michael Mulderrick / Martin Lavin is on a boat to Liverpool. So he goes to Liverpool. Does he just disappear into the UK, or does he go somewhere else?
Goes on to America, and he arrives in New York with a forged passport, passing himself off as Michael Mulderrick late in 1922. By early 1923, he is convalescing in a hospital in Cleveland from what he says is a bayonet wound that he obtained while on active volunteer duty for the anti-treaty side in Ireland. So that would seem to imply that he did get injured during the exchange.
Yes.
And that maybe it's gotten infected or something has happened in the meantime. So he's convalescing in this hospital and he's trying to claim political asylum, but now under his own name, Martin Lavin.
Right. So now he's sort of taking some ownership of his identity and of his history, for want of a better word, for his actions in Ireland. Briefly, at least. Briefly,
and he has a lot of supporters, like the Irish American community in Cleveland embrace him. Certain sections of them do. Terence McSweeney's wife is a supporter. They're pushing his case for political asylum. The US authorities want to deport him. Not because he's wanted for a killing in Ireland. They want to deport him because he's come into the country on false documents.
This has a touch of Al Capone getting caught on a tax issue, isn't it? Little bit.
Yeah, but ultimately they decide that they will give him political asylum. He goes to stay in the home of an Irish American attorney. He's gotten a job in an Irish American pressure group, and he studies law at night. Now, meanwhile, back in Ireland, Michael Mulderrick plays for Mayo in an All-Ireland final. Incidentally, the 21 final is played in 1923. He's playing in that final, but if you look at the programme from the time, the name is Tomás Mulderrick, not Michael. Now, he had a brother named Tomás who never played inter-county for Mayo, and the feeling his sons had much later was that they had felt the need to change his name in the programme so it wouldn't be associated with Martin Lavin.
Because by this stage, so Ciaran, from what you've just said there, the Martin Lavin story has spread. It's something that people are well aware of.
Well, he's a wanted man, and now everybody knows that he's left the country under Mick Mulderrick's name, that he's in America, because we know that there's a petition for him to remain there through political asylum, etc. So everybody knows where he is now. He's in the bosom of a community in Ohio. And meanwhile, Michael Mulderrick is making a name for himself as a footballer, playing with his cousin, Sean Lavin.
Incredible. By the way, what happens to the other guys who were involved in the killing?
And this is important. So in 1924, they are tried for the double murder of Tommy Ruan and Captain Willie Moran. And all of them, to a man, claim that they were not involved in the killing of the two individuals, that the man who killed both of them was Martin Lavin. They're all acquitted. Martin Lavin is not tried in absentia for some strange reason. So he's effectively home and clear now.
He's off scot-free. Isn't it kind of amazing too, though, that when the case was being pressed against Lavin's comrades, that they weren't, they could have been charged with aiding and abetting or conspiracy to murder or any number of other charges, but they went directly for murder and they got acquitted. That's a bit of a stroke of luck. to say the least. So where are we now? So now, I mean, effectively, Martin Lavin, and by the way, 1924.
Oh yeah, by the way, his brother is running in the Olympics this year in Los Angeles.
Is in LA in 1924. And his other brother is in another part of America. Do the twain meet? Does Sean have any contact with Martin?
We don't know if he does at this time, but we do know that at a later stage he does have contact with him. And so in the next few years, there's a few interesting developments. As I mentioned, he goes to law school. He qualifies as an attorney, but he can't take the bar because he's not a US citizen. And obviously, he's come into the US illegally on forged documents. So in order for him to be able to take the bar, he's got to prove that he is a US citizen. Now, this may tell you a lot about his character. He applies for the bar on the basis that he says he was born in a small town in Kansas, which quite conveniently had its courthouse and all its court records, including birth certificates, etc., burned the year before.
Oh, that's a shame. It's very four courts, isn't it? That's very unfortunate. Did he ever give the town a name, do we know?
Well, I'm sure he did at the time, but I wasn't able to find it. I've just been able to find the story. And again, as I so often do, I must give credit to James Laffey and his book, The Road to 51, for so much of this information.
Of course.
He has written about it in so much detail. But I mean, he qualifies for the bar in Michigan. He sets up his own practice in a small town of 1,000 people called Brighton, which is between Detroit, which is the growing motor city, and Lansing, the state capital. He has a thriving practice. He does very well for himself. He's known to be somewhat unscrupulous by local prosecutors. He will do anything to win. He's known to be a little hot-headed in his approach, to sometimes intimidate witnesses, and he's known to be judicious in how he selects juries, let's just say.
Okay, so a lot of the traits that we may have seen back in Kiltimagh in the early 1920s have translated quite seamlessly to practicing law in Middle America by the early 1930s by
now? It's 1931 actually when he qualifies. And you asked about does Sean ever visit him? Well, in 1932, Bill Dwyer, who we've also mentioned in a couple of episodes in the past, who was on his way to becoming the mayor of New York, not quite there yet. At this stage, he's still trying to bust up Murder Incorporated and make his name to be elected as mayor. But he decides that he'd like to honour one of his best friends who he had grown up with in Bohol, Ireland, and who had later made a name for himself in America, Martin Sheridan. So he decides that he would like to have the Martin Sheridan Cup in America, to play a game at the Polo Grounds in New York, to play a game in Boston, and a game at Yankee Stadium between New York and Mayo. They would play for this Martin Sheridan Cup, and he would finance everything. I presume he hoped he would make a profit off it, but that did not turn out to be the case for a variety of reasons. He actually lost the equivalent of the cost of a house on the venture.
Oh, good Lord. You would have liked to think Martin Sheridan, of course, being like one of the great Irish throwers of the late 19th century and early 20th century. Was he one of the Irish whales? He
was one of the Irish whales. He's one of the most successful Olympians of all time. He comes from a short distance from where John Lavin and Martin Lavin came from. But in any event, Mayo go on this trip in 1932, and Bill Dwyer is absolutely adamant that they take two people with them that had not been involved with Mayo in the year before. One of whom being the world-renowned sprinter, Sean Lavin, no harm for a bit of marketing, and the other being the internationally renowned boxer, Dick Hearns. So Dick Hearns and Sean Lavin are along for the trip with Mayo. In the end, New York win the cup. They've got a serious team at the time. Bill Landers from Kerry is playing with them. And the captain is Michael Mulderrick.
Oh, good Lord.
who is, apparently the New York captain, after being handed the Martin Sheridan Cup after Game 3, says, look, the right thing here is Martin Sheridan was a great Mayo man. You take the cup back to Mayo, and gave it to Michael Mulderrick. But Michael Mulderrick's adventures had only begun when they arrived in New York.
Oh, of course, because they will have been aware, even with this distance of, what are we talking about, 10 years?
Exactly 10 years.
They will be aware of another Michael Mulderrick who came through the system.
With the same date of birth, same place of birth.
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
He is detained on arrival in New York to see if he is the person who came in on forged documents 10 years before. He has quite the job persuading them. Bill Dwyer is called upon to vouch for him, in fact, being the person whose identity had been stolen in that case. So Michael Mulderrick is in New York. Sean Lavin is New York. The trip is a huge success in terms of, they do have big crowds. There's 33,000 at one of the matches, but they need 50,000 for Bill Dwyer to make his money back.
Bill Dwyer was being a bit optimistic, I think, was he? With his projections?
There was a promoter involved with the Polo Grounds at the time who wouldn't allow him to sell $1 tickets. Tickets had to be $1.50, and the $1.50 seems to have deterred 17,000 or thereabouts.
That's a shame. But
in any event, the trip's a success for Mayo. It's really well organised, but at the end of it, Sean Lavin decides to stay on. So in the press, it says that Sean Lavin has stayed on to visit family in the Midwest.
Well, he's only going to one place, isn't he?
He's on his way to Brighton, Michigan. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that, and I know you mentioned that they were cousins, but that Michael Mulderrick is, he's still involved in sport with Sean Lavin, and they're there together, kind of living their lives back home, knowing this madness has occurred involving Sean's brother, Michael's cousin, and I suppose what I'm trying to say is
they're bumping into Sean Tirouan every time they play a Connacht GAA match.
Exactly, like the proximity here is.
They're bumping into him downtown. They're bumping into him when they're playing for Kiltimagh. Like it's all, you can just imagine all that they've had to put aside in their lives because of this incident. It's a long time before we get to a point where Martin Lavin can travel to Ireland.
Oh, hang on. You mean he's kind of contemplating coming back?
So Martin Lavin has made a life for himself in Michigan. He marries a woman called Elizabeth Galbraith, actually a Protestant from Antrim, who later converts to Catholicism. He has children, one of whom is named Sean. And he begins post-Second World War to start taking trips to Ireland. And on these trips, he holds an annual party in October of each year in the Gresham Hotel in room 104 for family and ex-comrades in the IRA. Like there's actually, at one stage, I think a porter is dispatched to tell them to keep the noise down in this party, and the hot-tempered, now middle-aged man tells him, listen, sonny boy, we burned this place to the ground in 1922. You leave us alone, you know what I mean? So he's still a fiery character at this stage.
Not to be messed with.
But he is coming home more frequently. He's not at any jeopardy of being picked up for his supposed crimes. 1944 is a very significant year for the Ruans too. Sean T is running for election for Fine Gael in the general election. And Jimmy has a store in the town that's doing quite well. He lives above it, as people did at the time. His staff live above it, his family live above it. And there's a terrible fire, one of the worst fires in Irish history. Only 2 survive. A small child who's thrown out of a window. 2 the people on the street, and one woman who's injured badly jumping from the window. But everyone else in the property dies, including Jimmy, his wife, his children. So you can imagine the impact that has on Sean T. Ruan. So now both brothers are dead.
That is devastating. And this is Jimmy, who survived the shooting incident in Kiltimagh 22 years before.
Sean T. Ruan is not elected in that general election, but he does become a senator, and he's elected to the Senate 5 times over the next 20 years. He continues to teach. He doesn't retire as a teacher until 1956. At some point in the 1960s, a meeting is arranged in Jimmy Walsh's Kiltimagh with witnesses who will know the circumstance, standing by between himself and Martin Lavin.
Right. So we're talking 40 odd years later. The young, hot-headed, kind of striving young men of the 1920s are now aging elderly men, and there is an effort to bring them back. I won't say back together, but at least get them back in a room together. Martin Lavin, Sean T. Ruan.
Yeah, and Martin Lavin apologises for his part in the killing of Sean's brother Tommy. There seems to have been a shake of hands and embrace. He was forgiven by Sean T. Ruan, which really, when you think about it, is an amazing act.
Extremely noble.
He dies in 1967. So on one hand, you get this sense that it's, thank God it wasn't left too late. But that is the only apology forthcoming. He never apologises for the killing of Captain Willie Moran. He never apologises for stealing his cousin's identity, and they do meet, and his cousin does ask about it, and the response is, best just to leave sleeping dogs lie, Michael.
I think Martin Lavin was very, very lucky that a lot of sleeping dogs were left lie in that particular period of his life. That is one amazing, amazing story. And as you said at the very beginning, here's something that happened during the Civil War in 1922. 40 odd years later, particularly for a generation of people, it still resonates all the way through to the end of their lives. Is this a story, Ciaran, as a Mayo person? Is this a story in the annals of Mayo GAA, in the annals of Mayo life? Is this a story that's been carried forward, or is it one, apart from James Laffey's work to research it for his book, has it been sort of left on the shelf and kind of just put aside?
No, I think obviously the Mulderigs, the younger Mulderigs, Sean and Michael, who played in 50 and 51 teams, they were aware of it from their father. I hadn't been aware of it. And I mean, the Mulderigs lived here in the area for a number of years. So it's not a story I was familiar with. I don't know that we would know as much about this if it wasn't for the work that James Laffey did. And this is just a subplot from within the tome he's written on the journey to 1951. But as I read it, it was the one where you were going, oh my God, how is this? How are they able to put all that aside? Like, just for Sean Lavin, for Michael Mulderig, for Sean T. Ruan, for Dick Walsh. You know, we hear stories all the time about the healing effect of the GAA in the Civil War. And Mayo doesn't have that story like that you hear about with Kerry teams, which I'm sure is one we'll come back to at some stage. But it does have this story in the background that just seems to have been pushed to the rear. And often Civil War stories are hidden. Within my own family, I can remember speaking to a grandaunt and getting her to talk about some of the things that had happened locally during the Civil War. And her sister walked into the room and said, "We don't talk about that. There's a pact." That was the end of that chat.
That was the end of that chat. But luckily people kept this story alive for us to be able to explore today. Incredible story. Ciaran, thanks so much for bringing it to us. It's like, what a story of just kind of resilience and dignity on the side of the Ruans and Sean Lavin as well to maintain what was an incredible sporting career and personal life. If anyone wants to go back and listen to that episode we did on Sean Lavin as the first man to solo Gaelic football, we talk a lot about the man he became, and he was an extraordinary man. So amazing resilience from all of those people to maintain themselves, so in the way that they did and have the lives that they did after a tragedy like that. Ciaran, thanks again for everybody listening. We hope you enjoyed that. Murder is not somewhere we thought we'd be going, but here we are. So if you enjoyed that episode, if it grabbed you and drew you in, please like this episode on your little podcast server there, rate it, throw a review in, good or bad, doesn't matter. If you thought, what the hell are they doing talking about this kind of stuff on a Gaelic Games podcast, let us know. Engage with us, let us know you're there. And if you like to hear more of this, we have over 70 episodes now in our Cordia Club package. Price of less than the price of a program per month. You get everything. You get your free episodes on this side, but you get access to just as many episodes on the other side, which, as I say, is heading into a big figure. Now, Ciaran, thanks again. And we'll be back, of course, later in the week, towards the weekend, with our bite-size episode, which, of course, will be exploring the championship games to come this weekend through the medium of their histories, telling a few old yarns, and trying to just bring a little different angle to all of these games, these big games that are coming. So we'll talk to you then.
Go on, folks.
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.